Hello, dear listeners. I'm your host, Genevieve Hopkins, and welcome to episode 26 of the Wheel and Cross podcast. I hope you're enjoying the countdown to Christmas wherever you are. Many of you in the Northern Hemisphere will be heading towards the depths of winter and the winter solstice, while many of us Antipodeans are looking forward to Christmas in the middle of our hot summer. It was fun to share the joy of an Aussie Christmas with you last week. This week, in anticipation of a visit from the main man of the season, Santa Claus, we're going to dive into the fascinating history and traditions of Santa's helpers. Thanks to Christmas movies, Christmas cards, illustrations, and modern-day folk tales about Santa Claus, Santa's helpers are usually depicted as jolly little elves who assist Santa in making and wrapping children's toys at their home in the North Pole. However, in mainland Europe, Santa's helpers are less convivial, and some are sinister, or even downright terrifying. Let's take a look at the history of Santa's helpers from the nice to the not so nice. This podcast is free, but if you like my work and would like to support me so that I can continue doing it, please consider a paid subscription on the Wheel and Cross Substack page, www.wheelandcross.substack.com. If that is not possible and you enjoy this podcast, I would really appreciate your reviews on any of the podcasting platforms you use. Feel free to share this podcast and leave comments on the podcast page. Welcome to episode 26 of the Wheel and Cross podcast, Santa's Helpers, the nice and the not so nice. As always, I would like to acknowledge the custodians of these lands on which I work and live, in Australia's capital region, the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my deep respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations across Australia. In 1932, Walt Disney produced a short animated film called Santa's Workshop, about Santa and his little helpers preparing for Christmas. Santa's elves are depicted as small, jolly and industrious pixie-like creatures with pointy ears, long beards and pointy hats. They are responsible for making and wrapping toys in Santa's workshop and for taking care of Santa's reindeer. But where did this idea of Santa's jolly and helpful elves come from, considering that elves from the older European traditions are much darker and some are downright terrifying? Although Santa Claus has ancient ties to Christmas, as we shall see in next week's episode, the Christmas elves are a much more recent entity. They first appeared in a book by American author Louisa May Alcott in 1855. Louisa wrote the much-loved novel Little Women in 1868, but her book Christmas Elves was never published. 2 years later, Harper's Weekly published an anonymous poem, The Wonders of Santa Claus, which describes the elves. Beyond the ocean many a mile, and many a year ago, there lived a wonderful queer old man in a wonderful house of snow. And every little boy and girl, as Christmas Eve arrives, no doubt will be very glad to hear the old man is still alive. In his house upon the top of a hill, and almost out of sight, he keeps a great many elves at work, all working with all their might to make a million pretty things, cakes, sugar plums and toys, to fill the stockings hung up, by the little girls and boys. It would be a capital treat, be sure, a glimpse of his wondrous shop, but the queer old man, when a stranger comes, orders every elf to stop. And the house and workmen all instantly take a twist, and just you may think you are there, they are off in a frosty mist. In 1873, the front cover of the widely circulated American magazine Godey's Lady's Book showed an engraving of Santa directing his elves while they made toys, with the caption, "Here we have an idea of preparations that are made to supply the young folks with toys at Christmas time." Santa's elves were included in an influential play written by Austin Thompson in 1876 called The House of Santa Claus, a Christmas fairy show for Sunday schools. By the end of the 1800s, Santa and his elves were firmly established in the popular imagination. In 1922, Norman Rockwell famously painted Santa, including his industrious elves, for the cover of the American publication, The Saturday Evening Post. Inspiration for Santa's elves likely came from the Scandinavian Yule traditions of immigrant families in America. Before St. Nicholas or Santa became popular in Sweden, gifts were given at Yuletide by the Julbock, or the Yule goat, which we explored in a previous episode, Episode 9, Scandinavian Yule Creatures. This gift-giving characteristic shifted in the 1800s to the tomte or nisse, a popular pixie-like entity which protected farms, homesteads and familial houses, explored in the same episode. It's easy to see how the white-bearded little folk with red pointy hats and big noses inspired the depiction of Santa's elves, though they are popular Yuletide characters in their own right. As folktales often do, the story of Santa's elves has evolved, and now we find that according to the internet, Santa has 6 official elves, each responsible for different tasks. No source material can be found for these names, but their propagation across the internet is interesting nonetheless. Meet the 6 official Santa's elves, as compiled by Manimal Tales. Alabaster Snowball. Alabaster is the administrator of Santa's infamous naughty and nice list. You definitely want to make sure you're always nice to him. Bushy Evergreen. Bushy is the inventor of the magic toy-making machine Santa uses to produce all the toys that are sent to kids all over the world. Pepper Mint Sticks. Pepper is the protector of Santa's secret village near the North Pole. Think of him as head of elf security. Shinny Upper Tree. Shinny is Santa's oldest friend and co-founder of Santa's secret village and workshop. Sugar Plum Mary, aka Merry Christmas. Mary is in charge of all the sweets and treats production. She is Mrs. Claus's assistant and is in charge of the kitchen. Let's not dwell too much on the fact that the only female elf is both an assistant and works in the kitchen. Or let's do, actually. Then there's One Horse Open Sleigh. He's responsible for Santa's sleigh, as well as taking care of the reindeer. We now, of course, also have the relatively new tradition and the commercial sensation of Elf on the Shelf. The Elf on the Shelf concept was first conceived in 2005 by the Lumistella Company, according to the marketing material, to create joyful family moments through the magic of Christmas. The Lumistella Company website describes Elf on the Shelf as a fun-filled Christmas tradition that has captured the hearts of children everywhere who welcome home one of Santa's scout elf messengers each holiday season. These magical elves help Santa manage his nice list by taking note of a family's Christmas adventures and reports back to Santa at the North Pole nightly. Each morning, the scout elf helper returns to its family and perches in a new spot, waiting for someone to spot them. Children love to wake up and race around the house looking for their elf. Many parents find joy in this tradition, reflected in the magical belief of their children and/or the humorous and sometimes quite naughty escapades of their elf on the shelf. You can now buy elf outfits, elf pets and elf mates. Internet memes, videos and stories about elf on the shelf abound on the internet. It can take quite a bit of creativity and effort to maintain this tradition. In response, there are now pages and online shops that provide ideas and products for each day, and there are even pages dedicated to elf on the shelf burnout. This tradition does look fun, but I'm happy to avoid it in my household. We have plenty of other, less stressful traditions to keep us busy. Speaking of traditions, the jolly little elf as Santa's helper is not a common tradition in many mainland European countries. Instead, Santa is often accompanied by more sinister helpers, who are often creepy and sometimes utterly frightful. Zwarte Piet, or Black Pete, originated in Holland and accompanies St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, on St. Nicholas Day, the 5th of December, distributing sweets to well-behaved children or punishments to ill-mannered ones. Some historians believe that the origin of Sinterklaas and his helpers is linked to Odin's wild hunt, in which he was always accompanied by two black ravens, Hugin and Munin. These ravens would listen at the chimneys in a similar manner to Zwarte Piet and tell Odin about the good and bad behaviours of the mortals in each home. In medieval iconography, St. Nicholas is sometimes associated with the taming of a chained demon, who was scorched with fire and forced to assist St. Nicholas. This demon was later reimagined as a dark-skinned human during the early 19th century, in the likeness of Spanish Moors, who worked as Sinterklaas's servant. The servant character of Zwarte Piet was first printed in the 1850 book Sint Nicolaas en zijn Knecht, or St. Nicholas and His Servant, by Amsterdam-based primary school teacher Jan Schenkman. This book also established another myth that is still part of St. Nicholas Day intocht, or the arrival of St. Nicholas and Zwarte Piet traditions, which describes St. Nicholas and Zwarte Piet arriving in Holland from Spain by boat. Other stories about Zwarte Piet claim that he was a young Ethiopian slave rescued by St. Nicholas. The image of Sinterklaas's servant quickly evolved into a caricature of an African slave similar to the racist and distasteful American blackface. This racially based custom continued into the 2000s. Although it could be argued that people painting themselves black as part of festive or religious rites is an ancient European custom, the servile characteristics, facial features and costumery of Zwarte Piet are unmistakably related to racist depictions of African slaves. This has been attested in several sources from the 1800s, which I will not repeat as they are deeply racist. Since the early 2010s, there has been increasing controversy related to Zwarte Piet. Anti-racist groups trying to change or get rid of Zwarte Piet have clashed with right-wing nationalists who want to maintain Zwarte Piet and have reacted with violence. In 2021, a popular alternative was suggested, that of Roetveeg Piet, or Sooty Piet, whose face is streaked with soot rather than painted black. However, A December 2020 survey by Ian van Daag revealed that 55% of those surveyed supported the traditional appearance of Zwarte Piet, 34% supported changing the character's appearance, and 11% were unsure. The survey reported that 78% did not see Zwarte Piet as a racist figure, while 17% did. The most frequently mentioned reason of those who were in favour of changing the character was to put an end to the discussion. While Zwarte Piet is morally problematic, Krampus is utterly terrifying. Krampus originated in the central and eastern alpine regions of Europe. He is depicted as a large, hairy man with black or brown fur, the cloven hooves and horns of a goat, a long pointed tongue, and fangs or tusks. Krampus is widely recognised as a pre-Christian figure, originally called Pecht, before he was transformed into the devil as Christianity spread. Renamed Krampus, and made subject of St. Nicholas's will. In the Christian custom, Krampus accompanies St. Nicholas, whipping naughty children with a switch of birch. Those who are very naughty are stuffed into a bag or satchel on Krampus's back and kidnapped, drowned, eaten, or transported to hell. While St. Nicholas Day is celebrated in many parts of Europe on the 6th of December, Krampusnacht, or Krampus Night, is celebrated on St. Nicholas Day Eve with large and raucous processions called Krampuslaufen, previously known as Perchtenlaufen. People in costumes of animal furs and Krampus masks march through town streets accompanied by wild drumming and loud horns to scare children into good behaviour. The festivities are traditionally lubricated by Krampus schnapps, a strong distilled fruit brandy. Krampuskartel, or Krampus cards, as a counterbalance to Christmas cards, became popular in the late 1800s. And have seen a resurgence in popularity in recent years. Krampus has even become a Hollywood horror icon, with a horror comedy film about Krampus released in 2015. Less scary versions of Krampus evolved in different parts of Germany and other regions of Europe, where he is usually depicted as a sinister old man with a penchant for whipping naughty children. Knecht Ruprecht, or Servant Rupert, or even Robert, is another dark helper for St. Nicholas that originated in Germany. He is depicted as an old man wearing a black or brown robe with a pointed hood. He walks with a limp or holds a long staff and a bag of ashes, and is occasionally depicted wearing little bells on his clothes. He sometimes rides on a white horse, and he is sometimes accompanied by men dressed as old women with blackened faces, or by fairies. Knecht Ruprecht traditionally asked children if they could pray. Children who could recite their prayers were given apples, nuts, and gingerbread, and if they could not, he hit them with his bag of ashes. In the Alpine regions of Germany, Knecht Ruprecht accompanies St. Nicholas and gives naughty children gifts of coal, sticks, or stones, while St. Nicholas gives sweets to well-behaved children. Both St. Nicholas and Knecht Ruprecht are accompanied by the terrifying Krampus. Ruprecht is one of the German forms of the name Robert, and was a common name for the devil in Germany. Belsnickel, also known as Belschnickel or Pelsnickel, or even Belsnigel, originated in the Palatinate region of southwestern Germany, and is often depicted as a misshapen and dishevelled old man, dressed in ragged furs, sometimes wearing a mask with a long tongue. Similar to Knecht Ruprecht, Belsnickel hunts misbehaving children and punishes them with a switch, but he also gives out sweets, nuts and cakes to well-behaved children. The Belsnickel tradition accompanied German immigrants to America and is still practiced amongst the Pennsylvanian Dutch. A 19th century first-hand account of the Belschnickel tradition in Allegheny County, Maryland, states that Santa Claus was not known in his community, and instead, children were visited by a different character. He was known as Christkindl, Belschnickel, and sometimes as the Christmas woman. Children then not only saw the mysterious person, but felt him, or rather his stripes upon their backs with his switch. The annual visitor would make his appearance some hours after dark, thoroughly disguised, especially the face, which would sometimes be covered with a hideously ugly fizz. Generally wore a female garb, hence the name Christmas woman. Sometimes it would be a veritable woman, but with a masculine force and action. He or she would be equipped with an ample sack about the shoulders filled with cakes, nuts and fruits, and a long hazel switch, which was supposed to have some kind of a charm in it as well as a sting. One hand would scatter the goodies upon the floor, and then the scramble would begin by the delighted children, and the other hand would ply the switch upon the backs of the excited youngsters, who would not show a wince. But had it been parental discipline, there would have been screams to reach a long distance. Jacob Brown, 1830, in a collection of Brown's miscellaneous writings. Père Fouettard, which is French for father whipper or old man whipper, features in the Christmas customs of France, Belgium and Switzerland. He too is a sinister-looking man with scraggly unkempt hair and a long beard, armed with a whip or switch, sometimes carrying his spare switches in a wicker basket on his back. According to a folk tale first told in the year 1252, he was a butcher or innkeeper who, with his wife, kidnapped, robbed and killed wealthy children, then carved them up and hid them in salting barrels. Saint Nicholas was said to have discovered the crime, brought the children back to life, and then forced Père Fouettard into eternal bondage. Père Fouettard now follows Saint Nicholas, dispensing coal or beatings to naughty children. Saint Nicholas's dark helper characters can be found all across Europe, with similar characteristics and traditions, albeit different names. Many regions in mainland Europe are experiencing a revival of these Christmas antagonists, often as antidotes to the commercialised and sanitised Christmas icon of Santa Claus or the Christian icon St. Nicholas, and as part of a general revival of folk traditions. While the tradition of the dark helpers is fascinating, it's not something I grew up with, and I don't feel pulled to incorporate it into my own traditions. I'll stick to the Anglo-American Christmas elves and Santa's helpers for now, but who knows? Maybe when the children are older, there might be room for a bit of Krampus mischief. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the fascinating history of Santa's elves and his older and darker helpers. Next week's episode is all about the history of one of our most beloved Christmas icons, Santa Claus. In the meantime, feel free to explore the episodes and articles from my winter-themed Yuletide series, which also feature old traditions that have influenced our modern-day Christmas celebrations. See you next week for episode 27, The Origin of Santa Claus.